In this video, I wanted to share a high-level video on how I make these LEGO videos. It's not an in-depth technical dive and not a tutorial, though I do have some planned. Those will be more Blender, filming, and technology related. But this is more of a casual behind the scenes on how I currently make my LEGO videos. So let's get started. My workflow right now is that I design and build the buildings in Bricklink Studio, import them into Blender, and this cycle repeats until I'm done with the building and all its finishing touches. I place the building into my city and render the scenes. The final video is put together using DaVinci Resolve. I use Bricklink Studio to do all the buildings in my city. As I build in Studio, I check there are no floating parts and everything snaps together properly. If it works in Studio, that's good enough for me. Mechabricks is an alternative, and without getting into a deeper comparison between them, I just liked the UI of Studio better at the time, so I went with it, but that's more of a personal choice. I do like how Mechabricks provides better Blender integration, and the Blender materials are also very nice. So there are positives for Mechabricks too. But continuing on, buildings are often broken up into separate I/O files. I might put the sides in one file, the front lawn or loading dock in another, and the roof in a third, something along those lines. I combine them into a complete building in Blender. The reason why I do this will be clear in a bit. Once I'm done with the building, I import each associated I/O file into Blender. Each building has its own Blender file, but, as I said, could be made up of one or more I/O files. Studio has no native support for Blender. I use a free Blender plugin by Toby Lobster, link in the description box, to do the import. I have a video planned that goes into a deeper dive for the specific steps, settings, and issues. This is just a high-level summary. Toby's plugin can't import a I/O file directly, so I have to first export the I/O file into a .ldr file in Studio. The importing can take some time if your build is very large. That's why I said I break up the buildings into separate files, so I reduce the import times, since I'm only importing the sections of the building that needs changes. If I need to make changes to the roof, I make them in Studio, then import only the roof section back to Blender, not the entire building. Sometimes the import doesn't go perfectly. Some bricks might be in the wrong location. There may be missing bricks, which happens frequently for new parts. Or some bricks have bad mesh that doesn't render well in Blender, so I have to fix those issues in Blender as I notice them. This sometimes means I have to create the part myself in Blender from scratch. I usually have to make several more changes to the building before I'm done, so the cycle of going to Studio to make the changes and re-importing back to Blender happens a few times. Once the building is imported, it's not in the city yet, but in its own individual file, and you will want to do this too. I have a master city layout file, and place the buildings into this file by importing or linking and by placing them in the right spot in my city. You don't want to use the plugin to import directly into your master layout file, because the more bricks you have in this file, the longer the import takes. The linking of buildings also allows me to work on individual buildings without loading in the rest of the city. Since the layout file simply links objects, updates in the individual building file are automatically seen by the layout. Importing directly is okay for one-time creations, but since I'm continuing to grow the city, it's too large to handle direct imports. Those are the basic steps for creating the LEGO building and city. Next involves creating the videos. This involves creating low-poly versions of the building, setting up the cameras, blocking, rendering, and finally video editing. Once I'm done with the building, I go back to my building file and create a low-poly mock version of the building, kind of like a stand-in for the real thing, which I use for blocking. I'll get to why I do this in a bit. I start by rendering a orthographic projection of the building by rendering images from all sides and the top. I don't need the bottom. Next, I create a basic silhouette of the building in Blender and texture the shapes using those images taken. Just the important part of the buildings are textured, not everything. As your city gets larger, the Blender viewport will become slower and slower, and it degrades pretty fast. If you disable buildings in the viewport display, you get some performance back, but over time, it will become slow and unusable again. This is because even though you hide the object from the viewport, the objects are still there and performing tasks like creating new cameras or changing settings are super laggy and delayed. So to avoid this, while I'm blocking out the camera movements, I use those mock buildings created earlier as stand-ins. This allows me to be able to at least work in the city, configure the camera settings, and tweak its movements. It also allows me to quickly render a rough view of the scene very quickly. Once I'm satisfied with the camera movements, I replace the mock buildings with the real one and render in the command line. I do have a trick on how to do this in Blender, but I'll leave it to a deep dive as it's a bit technical and Blender specific, so stay tuned for that if you're interested. So once I'm done with the city updates and the camera movements are set up, I'm ready to do the rendering. I initially do a low res version. This version can be rendered very quickly, within minutes, so this version is good to finalize the camera movements and blocking of the buildings. Once everything is pretty much finalized, I render my full version. Each frame takes around 1 to 2 minutes. I render my videos at 30 frames per second, so 10 seconds of a video can take 7 to 10 hours. There are a lot of Blender specific performance tuning and other things I do to make sure the render times are reasonable, but in general, this is the last step of rendering the scene. I use DaVinci Resolve to put the video together. The one important feature is the temporal denoiser. While I do use Blender's denoiser to clean up each frame, one at a time, there are artifacts noticeable when you view a collection of frames as a video. I haven't had too much success fixing those in Blender, but DaVinci can clean it up a bit. One of the creative aspects to my video is the room. I wanted to mimic creating an actual Lego city, so I wanted to create a proper, realistic room environment to build in. I don't want the layout to just extend infinitely into white space, and at the same time, I don't want the room to be some unrealistic huge warehouse. I sized the room so it's large enough to build a substantial part of the city, but still realistic to what a Lego city builder might have in their basement or barn. It started off relatively simple, but I've been adding to it as time permits. It's a bit of a relaxation project for me as I enjoy doing 3D modeling, and it's a nice break from Lego. I'm not intending to be super consistent about the room. After all, it's only the background, so you might see the windows and doors change positions as required. As I run out of space, right now, my plan is to knock a hole through one of these load-bearing walls and run the track through to the next room. I won't take the whole wall down, but rather punch holes and run tracks through, as that's probably what I would do in real life. One key aspect is I try to balance between achieving photorealistic results, legitimate Lego builds, and still having fun. So in the end, I enjoyed rendering photorealistic videos as if they were physical models so others can watch for inspiration and ideas. I'm also changing and tweaking things as I go. I'm making it more realistic as time goes on and adding little details here and there. And that's pretty much it. This is just a high-level view on the steps I take. There's a lot more detail and performance-related issues that are tackled, which I'll talk about in the deeper dives. So stay tuned for those. If you have any other questions, leave a comment. Thanks for watching.